Sometimes the smallest act of kindness can change a destiny forever. And sometimes the person you help is far more powerful than you could ever imagine. Marcus Johnson was only 22 years old, but his life carried the weight of many decades. He was a civil engineering student at a local university in Atlanta, and while other students his age were still figuring out their identities, Marcus was already balancing survival. Every morning he attended lectures. He sat in classrooms where professors spoke about bridges, concrete strength, and city infrastructure. Marcus loved these lessons. He dreamed of designing structures that could stand for generations, buildings that would carry his name long after he was gone. His notebooks were filled with calculations and sketches. To him, every formula was not just math, but a step toward a better life. But dreams did not pay bills. By evening, Marcus tied on an apron and worked at Riverstone Diner, a mid-sized restaurant known for its fried chicken and warm biscuits. The place smelled of oil and spices, and it was always crowded. Families came in after church. Workers came after long shifts. And students came with their friends to hang out. Marcus did everything. He served food, carried trays, and when the dishwasher was absent, he scrubbed plates until his hands were sore. The manager, Mr. Blake, a white American man in his 40s, barked orders with no mercy. He never cared how tired Marcus was. If Marcus slowed down even for a minute, Blake would shout across the room, embarrassing him in front of staff and customers. Still, Marcus endured. He came from a poor family in the south side of the city. His mother, once a nurse, now suffered from health problems that kept her at home. His younger brother, Jamal, was still in high school and needed guidance. Rent, medical bills, school fees, food on the table. It all fell on Marcus. Sometimes he worked until midnight, returned home exhausted, then stayed awake for hours, finishing assignments. He would sit at the small kitchen table, a dim lamp shining over pages of equations. His uniform still smelled of grease, but his mind was chasing bridges and skyscrapers. Life was not easy, but Marcus carried one belief inside him. If he worked hard enough, if he kept pushing, education could change his life. He had no wealth or privilege, but he had determination. And that was his anchor in a world that often felt like it was trying to drown him. One humid Saturday afternoon, Marcus walked into Riverstone Diner for his weekend shift. The restaurant was buzzing with noise. The clatter of plates, the sizzling from the kitchen, the laughter of families, and the chatter of teenagers. Marcus tied his apron, greeted the cooks, and stepped onto the floor. He moved from table to table with practiced speed. He served drinks, wrote down orders, and carried trays stacked with food. He smiled when customers looked at him, though his smile often faded the moment he turned away. Then, something unusual caught his attention. Near the glass door entrance, a little girl stood frozen. She could not have been more than 8 or 9 years old. She was black, with dark curly hair that needed combing, and a faded dress that looked like it had been worn too many times. Her wide eyes darted around nervously, as if she was lost. Marcus noticed the way she held her stomach, the way her lips trembled. He had seen that look before, a look of hunger and fear. Before Marcus could step forward, Mr. Blake stormed across the floor. His voice boomed so loudly that customers turned their heads. "You cannot be in here without an adult. This is not a playground. Out you go." The girl flinched at his tone. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Instead, her stomach growled audibly, and a few customers laughed cruelly. A group of waitresses whispered to each other, covering their mouths, smirking as if the child was an inconvenience rather than a human being. Marcus felt something heavy in his chest. He had been on the receiving end of that tone many times. The tone that said you did not belong, that you were less than others. He clenched his jaw, watching the little girl shrink back toward the door. Marcus placed the tray he was holding onto the counter and walked over to the girl. He bent slightly so his eyes met hers. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked gently. The girl nodded faintly, but her small voice whispered, "I am just hungry." The sound of her stomach growling again made more people chuckle. One customer muttered loudly, "She should go back where she belongs." Another shook his head with a laugh. Mr. Blake stepped forward, his face red with irritation. "Marcus, get her out of here right now. We have paying customers. This is not a soup kitchen. She is not your problem." Marcus froze. He needed this job. He could not afford to be fired. Yet he looked at the girl and saw not a stranger, but a reflection of his younger brother. If Jamal were lost and hungry, would he not pray that someone would help him instead of mocking him? Marcus straightened his back. "She is hungry. I will pay for her meal. Out of my pocket." The diner went silent. Even the cooks peeking from the kitchen stopped moving for a second. Customers stared, some with judgment, others with surprise. Blake narrowed his eyes. "You are making a mistake, Marcus." But Marcus ignored him. He guided the girl to an empty booth in the corner. "Sit here. What would you like to eat?" he asked kindly. The girl looked down at her hands. "Just something small." Marcus ordered her chicken tenders, fries, and a small milkshake. When the food came, her eyes lit up. She ate slowly at first, then faster as the hunger took over. Marcus watched, his heart aching yet relieved. He knew it might cost him his job, but in that moment, her dignity mattered more than his fear. Whispers spread through the diner like wildfire. A group of young men at a nearby table laughed loudly. "Look at the hero," one said with a sneer. "Feeding strays now," another added with cruel amusement. A couple of waitresses rolled their eyes, muttering about Marcus being foolish. Some customers shook their heads in disapproval, as if his kindness was some form of rebellion. Marcus heard it all, but he focused only on the little girl eating her meal. Every bite she took reminded him why he made his choice. Mr. Blake was furious. When the rush slowed down, he cornered Marcus near the staff station. His voice was sharp, his finger pointing dangerously close to Marcus's chest. "This is unacceptable. You embarrassed me in front of paying customers. You are not a charity worker. You are an employee. If you ever pull a stunt like this again, you are fired." Marcus wanted to argue. He wanted to say that kindness was never a stunt, but he bit his tongue. He could not lose his job. Not with his mother depending on his income and his brother needing support. So he nodded silently, though his fists tightened behind his back. Still, inside his chest, he knew something unshakable. He had done the right thing. As the girl finished her meal, the diner door swung open with force. A tall man in a tailored suit rushed in, followed by two security guards. His sharp eyes scanned the room, moving from table to table with urgency. The moment he saw the girl, his entire expression changed. Relief washed over his face. "Amara," he called out. The girl jumped from the booth. "Daddy," she cried, running into his arms. The diner fell into stunned silence. Every whisper, every laugh, every cruel remark died instantly. The man knelt down, hugging his daughter tightly. His suit was expensive, his watch gleaming under the restaurant lights. He was not just any father. He was Richard Hayes, one of the most successful businessmen in the city. His face was familiar from newspapers and magazines. His company had built skyscrapers, shopping malls, and entire neighborhoods. "Where were you?" "I was so worried," Richard said, his voice thick with emotion. He kissed his daughter's forehead, holding her as if he would never let go again. Then he looked around the diner, his eyes sharp, scanning every face. "Who helped you? Who took care of you here?" Amara pointed toward Marcus. "He did, Daddy. He bought me food when everyone else was mean. The words hit the room like a hammer. Every customer who had mocked the girl now shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Every staff member who had laughed went pale. Mr. Blake's confident smirk disappeared in an instant. Richard's gaze locked on Marcus. It was not just a look of gratitude. It was a look of recognition. The atmosphere in the diner shifted instantly. The customers who had laughed or whispered now looked at their plates. Suddenly, uncomfortable. The waitstaff stopped in their tracks. Mr. Blake stepped forward, trying to regain control, his voice tight. "Mr. Hayes, sir, I did not know she was your daughter. Of course, we would have treated her differently if we had known," he said, his tone suddenly syrupy, like a man trying to cover shame with words. Richard Hayes did not reply. Instead, his eyes scanned the room with quiet intensity. "So you mistreated a child because you assumed she did not belong here? Because she looked poor?" The manager opened his mouth, then closed it. The words would not come. Richard took a step closer to Marcus. "And you," he said, looking at Marcus, "you chose kindness. You could have ignored her. You could have obeyed the rules and let her leave hungry. But you did not." Marcus looked down at his hands, feeling heat rise to his cheeks. "I just did what anyone should do," he said softly. Richard smiled faintly, shaking his head. "No, not anyone. Most people chose cruelty. You chose compassion. That is rare. That is remarkable." The little girl, Amara, tugged at Marcus's sleeve. "He is my hero, Daddy," she whispered. Richard looked down at her, then back at Marcus. "I agree," he said firmly. "He is a hero." The next day, Marcus expected to be fired. After all, he had defied Mr. Blake openly in front of customers. He walked into the diner with a nervous stomach, wondering if he would be handed a termination letter before his first coffee. Instead, he was summoned to the back office. There, sitting behind the desk, was Richard Hayes. Mr. Blake was in the corner, looking like a guilty child. "I own this restaurant," Richard began. "Normally, I do not interfere in daily operations. But what happened yesterday could not go unnoticed." Marcus swallowed hard. "Sir, I did not mean to cause trouble. I only wanted to help her." Richard leaned forward. "And that is why I am speaking to you. I want to know more about you. Tell me about your studies, your dreams, your life." Marcus hesitated, then began. He spoke of his childhood, of his mother and brother, of the struggle of living paycheck to paycheck while studying civil engineering. He spoke of his dreams to build bridges and skyscrapers, to create something that would last, something meaningful. Richard listened quietly, nodding at intervals, his eyes thoughtful. Marcus could not tell if he looked impressed or evaluating him. Finally, Richard spoke. "You remind me of myself when I was young. I know what it is like to come from nothing. And I know what it is like to fight for every opportunity. That is why I want to help you." Marcus blinked in disbelief. "Help me?" Richard smiled. "Yes, help you realize your potential." Richard offered Marcus a full scholarship to finish his civil engineering degree without worrying about money. He also offered a paid internship at his construction company, which was involved in some of the most high-profile projects in the city. Marcus felt his heart race. This was more than he had ever dreamed. The scholarship alone was enough to lift the weight off his family's shoulders. The internship could give him experience that no ordinary student could ever hope for. "But why me?" Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Richard leaned back in his chair. "Because character matters more than talent. You prove that with one small act of kindness. That is the type of person I want to invest in, not because of what you have, but because of what you are capable of being." Marcus could not speak. He felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. All the long nights, All the struggles, every sacrifice, every moment of hunger or exhaustion led him to this moment. He had done something small, and it changed everything. Months passed. Marcus thrived in his studies and internship. He worked harder than ever, determined not to let this opportunity slip through his fingers. He applied every lesson, from his civil engineering classes to the real projects at Richard's company. He learned to read blueprints like a master, to calculate loads and stresses with precision, to communicate with contractors and workers respectfully. But even as he rose, Marcus did not forget where he came from. He never looked down on others. He continued to help people, especially those struggling, whenever he could. Amara, the little girl he had helped, sometimes visited the construction sites with her father. She would wave shyly from a safe distance, a small smile on her face. Her presence reminded Marcus that one simple choice to help someone could ripple through time and change lives. He also noticed changes in the restaurant. Mr. Blake no longer mocked people. Some staff members whispered about Marcus's story, and a few even admitted privately that his courage and kindness had opened their eyes. Marcus understood that success was not just about money, degrees, or status. It was about integrity, humility, and the ability to make the right choice when no one was watching. Years later, Marcus stood at the opening ceremony of a new suspension bridge in Atlanta. The ribbon was stretched across the walkway, waiting to be cut. The mayor, city officials, press, and hundreds of citizens were gathered. Marcus adjusted his tie nervously. Richard Hayes stood beside him, smiling proudly. He whispered, "You earned this, Marcus. Not just the bridge, but the life you built." Marcus looked at the bridge, its steel beams glinting in the sunlight, and thought back to that one day in the diner. That one choice, one small act of kindness. That choice had changed everything. He raised the scissors and cut the ribbon. The crowd applauded. Cameras flashed, and Marcus felt something deeper than pride. He felt purpose. He realized that greatness is not built by talent alone, nor by wealth or luck. It is built by decisions made when no one else is watching, by courage, by empathy, by kindness. And sometimes the smallest gesture can create a legacy that lasts far longer than anyone ever imagined. Moral lesson of the story is that one act of kindness can change a life, and sometimes it can change the world. Tell us in the comments section what you learned from this story. Like and subscribe the channel for more interesting videos.